Well, good morning. So here we are, part 3 of a series of messages that we've entitled Love and War, or the subtitle, The Stupid Stuff We Fight About and What It Reveals About Our Marriage. This week I was reminded about a video that I found a few years ago that so perfectly illustrates the stupid stuff we fight about. And it was so good, I just thought I'd share it with you. You guys ready? Watch this. I think this is hilarious.
That's not how you fold the towels.
It doesn't matter how you fold a towel.
It does matter how you fold a towel. If you want it to fit in the closet, you have to roll it. Oh my God, could you chew any louder?
This goes on here. It takes 2 seconds.
Well, then the next person who comes in will do it.
That's not the point. Hey, did you throw away my leftovers?
No.
I could have
What did you call me?
Nothing. The toilet paper goes over. It's printed that way so you could see it.
No, the toilet paper goes under so that the cats don't get at it.
That makes no sense.
What do you want to get for dinner?
I don't really care.
Then just pick something.
You choose.
Told you.
Shut up. I don't see why I have to put the utensils face down.
Because when they're sticking up like that, if someone trips and falls, they're going to impale themselves and die.
That's literally the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
I'm not playing this game where I list every single thing and you shoot it all down. I'm not doing this again.
Well, then I don't know what to tell you.
Oh my gosh, watch this. This is the best line.
Did you watch this without me?
You weren't home! Seriously, 6 more inches and it's in the sink.
Well, then put it in 6 more inches.
I get it.
Anything will be fine. It's
Fine.
food.
Fine. All right, we're gonna get pizza.
Anything but pizza.
What do you want to eat?
That is Bill Paxton.
It is Bill Pullman.
Bill Paxton was in Aliens. That is Bill Paxton. That is him. Game over, man. That is that man right there.
Why am I gonna put them away? I'm wearing them tomorrow morning.
I don't care if you're wearing them tomorrow morning. I don't want them just sitting by my side of the bed all night.
Why do you do this? You squeeze from the bottom. The next person doesn't have to squeeze then.
It's toothpaste. It's not like it's hard to squeeze it from a new area on the tube.
Why are we fighting about this?
Why are we fighting about this?
Why are we fighting about this?
I'm sorry. I shouldn't have made you make the decision. With that being said, I think your original call of pizza is fine. Just no pepperoni.
What do you want on it then?
Anything other than pepperoni.
I'm going to murder you, and when the pizza guy gets here, he's going to help me bury your body, and then we are going to get married.
No, he won't, because he'll probably be like, yeah, I feel you, bro.
How true is that? That's the stupid stuff we fight about. And in the grand scheme of things, it really isn't as important as we make it out to be. And so in this series, we've been trying to look at some of those silly things that we fight about and ask ourselves the question, what does it tell us about what's really going on in our relationship with our spouse? And so in the first week of the series, we did a message entitled The Toilet Wars. We were talking about, like, does the toilet paper go over or back? Does the seat go up or down? And a host of other little domestic annoyances or preferences that we have that annoy our spouse, whether that's leaving lights on around the house in rooms that aren't being used, or wasting water, or the temperature in the house. It's silly stuff, but here's the deal. It tells us something. Because the temperature in the house, or what direction the toilet paper goes, or if the seat goes up or down on the toilet, is really about a preference. It's about a way that someone's learned to do their life in that particular environment. And so it's not about right or wrong, it's just about different, but it tells us something. How we negotiate different preferences reveals a lot about the amount of respect that we have for each other. Is a couple willing to show each other some respect around the differences that they have? And then in last week's message, we talked about a message entitled, You're Driving Me Crazy, We're talking about this idea of couples driving together in cars and the incredible things that we end up fighting about, like going too fast or not going fast enough, or riding the brake or not using the blinker, or being an aggressive driver. And there's all these interesting dynamics that happen in a car when a husband and wife drive together. And so it reveals something about our marriage, how we navigate the tension of stressful situations, which driving is, and we talked about that last Sunday. The tension of stressful situations reveals a lot about the level of trust that we have in each other. The one who's driving the car in the particular moment is simply trying to say, will you trust me? I know how to do this. But the person who's sitting in the passenger seat is also saying, will you trust me? I have feelings too, and I know how to do this too, and some things that you're doing are making me feel really, really uncomfortable. Will you trust that I feel uncomfortable? And around we go. And meanwhile, these things are revealing these enormous insights to the nature of our relationship with our spouse. And today we're going to talk about another one of the big issues that couples fight about again and again and again, over and over again, at least to a point. And what happens after so many years of always fighting about the issue is couples just stop talking about it. And they sort of go into their separate corners and sort of create their own life and their lifestyle, never really sharing the responsibility of one of the most critical areas of a marriage, and that is around money. Money is a really big deal. Look at this. Money problems are the number one topic that couples fight about most. You talk to a marriage therapist, you talk to psychiatrists, you talk to people who study the relationship of husbands and wives. They'll tell you that the one thing that most couples fight about the most always comes back to money. Here's an interesting statistic. Money issues is the third leading cause of divorce in North America behind infidelity and incompatibility. Couples fighting about money. So what are the issues? I mean, the issues are pretty familiar. Spending money we don't have. Usually one of the two partners feels like, why did you buy that? We don't really have money for that this month. And what's the response? At least what's the response I've heard all my marriage? It was on sale. Think of the money we saved. We didn't save any money if we didn't have it in the first place. Round and around. Buying stuff we don't need. Accumulating stuff that we rarely use. Got a closet full of clothes that we haven't worn in years. Living a lifestyle that we can't afford. And then this is huge source of tension in so many marriages is shouldering debt that we can't really pay off. We're trying, but we can never quite get rid of it. Folks, I'm telling you, the issue of money is enormous. And its impact on a marriage is devastating. In fact, one of the ways that I've learned to describe it is like this. Mismanaged finances, and in particular debt, mismanaged finances is like carbon monoxide silently contaminating a marriage with a toxic stress that ultimately suffocates a couple's love, a couple's harmony, and a couple's trust. The checkbook stays in the drawer. The credit card statements arrive at different points in time, and we never really look at it. We never really see the money. But what's happening is when our money is mismanaged, there's a stress that's happening in the marriage that ultimately becomes toxic. And here's just some of the things that are happening, and it's not ultimately about the money. It's stuff like guilt. You knew that you weren't really in a position to buy that this month, but you went ahead and did it without your partner's knowledge, and so you're feeling some guilt. There's shame, there's stress, there's fear, there's worry, the resentment of your financial situation, the frustration, anger that it brings out, the embarrassment of getting an insufficient funds notice in the mail, the distrust that ends up happening between a couple. This is what money problems create in a marriage. This is why marriages don't last when it comes to money issues. It has nothing to do with the paper actually money's made out of linen. Did you know that? It's cloth. And all it is a piece of cloth with some art on it and some numbers, but our society attaches to it such a significant amount of value that it holds this tremendous importance. And when it's an issue in a marriage, all of this is what it leaves behind. This is that toxic stress that couples live with, and few couples survive it. It's so important. So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about two topics. And then we're going to talk about their relationship to each other. We're going to talk about the topic of marriage. Now, we're not going to talk about the entire topic of marriage. We're going to talk about one aspect of marriage. Then we're going to talk about money, and we're not going to be able to talk about the whole topic of money. We're going to talk about one aspect of money. Both of them, what do the scriptures, what does the Bible have to offer us about an understanding of this single most important aspect of marriage, and what does the Bible want us to understand about one of the greatest dangers of money, and then what are the relationship between the two? Does that make sense? So let's talk about marriage. Again, just one very important aspect of marriage, and we see it in the earliest pages of the Bible. We're into chapter 2 of the book of Genesis, which is the first book of the Bible. God has just created the universe. Then he creates all that inhabits the universe. He creates a man and a woman, the first human beings. And then we read this. But for Adam, no suitable helper was found. So the Lord God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep, and while he was sleeping, he took one of the man's ribs and then closed up the place with flesh. Then the Lord God made a woman from the rib he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man. And the man said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of the man. And this is why a man leaves his father and his mother and is united to his wife, and they become" what? One. Of all of the things that God could have initially declared about marriage, that he wanted to establish for all time and all civilizations, the one word that he chooses is one. Because in the heart of God, the most important pursuit of marriage is oneness. God's design for marriage is a pursuit of oneness. Most people don't even understand that. They don't even know it. That when God established a relationship of husbands and wives, the one thing that he wanted most was that couple to pursue oneness. Now, what in the world is oneness? Well, we can describe it a couple of different ways. Here's my shot at it. Oneness is a mutual cooperation in the pursuit of common objectives. Husband and wives in a mutual cooperation in the pursuit of some common objectives. Oneness is an equal trust and respect for each other. That the man is not more important than the woman, that they are equally in value and importance to the relationship and God's design for marriage. It's a shared dependency for the fulfillment of responsibilities. God intended a man and a woman united together in a marriage to have an equal responsibility for sharing what all needs to get done in the pursuit of life. Now, they may take different responsibilities as each is gifted or better prepared or better equipped for it, but they share that mutually together in a dependency for one another. And it's a melding together of virtues, a melding together of values, and a melding together of priorities. That in God's mind and God's heart, he created the man, and that man was unique and intelligent and capable. And then God created the woman, and the woman was unique and intelligent and capable. And when he brought them together in marriage, he was designing that those two people would share their lives with one another at a depth, that their uniqueness and their intelligence and their capability would become as if you were looking at a single person. That you never really know one member of the partnership until you know both members. Does that make sense? God's heart for marriage was all about oneness. So, God intended marriage to be the single finest display of teamwork on planet Earth. Do you get that? That when you say I do, you're signing up for a team. The number one single finest display of teamwork on planet Earth. Do you know what the second finest display of teamwork is? Anybody? Want to take a guess? Like, according to the scriptures, God described that the church was to be the second finest display of teamwork on planet Earth. That all of us together, guess what? God actually uses the language in the New Testament that the church and all of its various parts, all of the very unique and intelligent and capable members of the church, they are to be what? One. That's us. Cibolo Creek Community Church, God's design for us is to work together as one for the common objective of accomplishing God's will on the earth. But his first and greatest team that he established for human beings was marriage. This is football season, if you hadn't noticed. I love watching football from the perspective of you got 11 guys on the field. Each of them take their position on the field. Each of them has a different responsibility, a different assignment that they have to get done in each play. And the really successful teams that are so much fun to watch is that all 11 guys do their particular assignment at their particular time, and it's like watching them work together as what? One. A really good team of multiple people working together as one. That was God's design for marriage. It's that two people united together would move together as one. So now let's come to money. We got this idea that marriage is to be about oneness. Now here's some specific things that God reveals about money in the pages of the Bible. Jesus says this in Matthew 6. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. In other words, it's all at risk. Jesus says, but you'd be wiser, you'd be smarter. Life will go better for you if you store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves can't break in and steal. For where your what? I'm sorry? Where your treasure is, the thing that you hold most valuable, the thing that has the greatest worth to you, where your treasure is, your heart will always go in that direction. So this is an important principle that we need to understand about the value of money, is that it can assume a place of such great value to us that it becomes like a treasure to us. And then what happens? Our heart is going to follow after it. Our priorities will follow after it. Our values will follow after it. Our behavior will follow after it. Money or treasure has the capacity of seducing our heart to be devoted to it. You get that? Then Jesus says this, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and you'll despise the other. And then it's interesting, Jesus says, yep, you can't serve both God and money. They are always going to be in conflict with each other because they hold different value. They have a different understanding of priorities. Okay, did you get that? You with me so far? Okay, so here's later in the New Testament, the Apostle Paul writes to the early church and he says this, but godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and we have clothing, we should just be content because we have our needs met. Those who want to get rich, hey, listen up. We live in that side of town. We live in those neighborhoods. Those who want to get rich, they're at a particular risk of falling into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. You see, money poses a certain risk to our soul. Then he continues, for the love of money, the craving for wealth, the desire for riches, and all that comes with it, the love of money, it's actually the root of all kinds of dangerous and destructive things. And some people, eager for money, they've wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. In other words, they've wandered from God's importance in their life and they've made a mess of themselves. So the Apostle Paul writes to Timothy, who was a church pastor in the early church. So these words would echo down the corridor of time, and he would say to me, the pastor of Cibolo Creek Community Church, Paul, I want you to instruct those who are rich. In this present world, please, whatever you do, don't be arrogant. Don't be arrogant, nor don't put your hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment, that every good and perfect thing that we have to enjoy in life comes from God. Command them to do good, to be rich when it comes to the deeds that are good, and to be generous and willing to share. And in this way, they will lay up treasures for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. Okay, so in those two passages, the words of Jesus, later the writings of the Apostle Paul, there's a warning about the potential danger that money can have in our life. Here's what I want us to know. That a sinful soul loves to leverage money for its sinister purposes. You see, all of us, we're tainted by sin. We don't always make the best or the right decisions that are good for us. And we certainly don't always make the right and best decisions about God's good will for our life. And money can often be at the root of that. Here's what a desire for wealth can create. Here's what it can stir. There's something about the human soul that when it sees money, it sort of brings out the worst of greed and envy and jealousy and stinginess and covetousness and an arrogance. And we can start to use money for manipulation and deception, which creates resentment and distrust. And this can fill a marriage. What Jesus in his words in Matthew chapter 6 and what the Apostle Paul is teaching us in the book of 1 Timothy is this, that money possesses the power to make a mess of relationships. Some of you are business people. You have your own business. You went into that business with some partners. And it started out as a really great partnership. And then that company started to do really, really well. And the profits started to increase. And some of you can give testimony to a story of what started out to be such a successful adventure. When the profits started to get so big that the dynamics started to change between you and your partners. And suddenly things like greed and envy and jealousy and covetousness started to thrive, and it split that partnership, and it complicated that company, maybe even ruined it. You've heard stories about that for years. I'm telling you, that's what happens in a marriage when a couple isn't careful about how they handle their finances with each other. It creates problems. So here's one one last interesting warning. The Apostle Paul writes this in another one of his letters to the New Testament church. He says, each of you must put off falsehood or lying, living deceptively. Speak truthfully to your neighbor, meaning this is a principle for all relationships, and you're never going to find anybody who's more neighborly than your spouse. Okay, so it applies. Each of you should put off falsehood. Speak truthfully to your neighbor, for we are members of one body. In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. Now, that is such an interesting principle. What is the Apostle Paul teaching the church? Is that when we allow lying and deceit and deception to come into a relationship and it ends up creating arguments, and we let those arguments go unattended and unforgiven and unreconciled, what Paul the Apostle is trying to teach us is that is the perfect environment for the enemy to get his foot in the door and start making a mess of your marriage. You see, you thought it was about debt, and you thought it was about racking up too many expenses on a credit card, and you thought it was about him not making enough in his salary. It isn't about that. It's about the disagreements and the discontentment and the distrust in all of that when sinful hearts get all wrapped around the value of money, and then pretty soon you're fighting about it, and you're not doing good by reconciling over those arguments. And Satan is getting his foot in the door of your marriage, and he's starting to push you apart because Satan takes great pleasure in dividing what God intended for unity. Remember what God's ultimate design for marriage was? It was oneness. There's nothing that Satan hates more than a successful couple pursuing oneness together. And he'll look for every possible way to get in there and mess it up. And the way that he does it most commonly is through issues of money. Satan takes great pleasure in driving you and your spouse apart from each other. So here's the warning. If money can separate a person from faith in God, which Timothy warns us about, if money can separate a person from their faith in God, it can certainly destroy a marriage between a husband and wife. That's a piece of cake. You're starting to see why it's so important that couples tend to this money issue with the most diligence that they can muster, because it has such a profound impact on the nature of the relationship with one another. So let's talk a little bit about some of the practical ways we can think about managing our money that will bring us greater unity in our marriage. Okay, so we'll start off with the bad. The bad is for a couple to go around thinking about it's my money. The wife over here thinking this is my money, and the husband over here thinking this is my money. It's my job, this is my income, this is my money, I'll do with it as I please, and I might share some with you. And she's over there, and she has her career, and she's thinking, this is my money, I'll buy my things with it, this is all mine. Okay, I'll just tell you right there, that posture, my money, does not look anything like oneness. Make sense? So you're already begging for problems if that's the posture that you're taking with money. So there's a better way. A better way is we start talking about our money. She earns some, he earns some, and they pool their resources together for the good of what it is that they're trying to accomplish in their life together. It's our money. That's a better way than my money. But there's still a best way. You interested? This is the one way that I can guarantee for you that your marriage will go better, that your relationship will be healthier. You interested? No, seriously, you interested? Because the minute you see it, you're going to go, nah, see, I like our money at least. The best way is to understand it's God's money. That every dollar that you have is not because you're so smart, because you're so talented, because you've had so many great opportunities and you've seized them and done something with it. It's because the good God of the universe has been kind to you. And he's blessed you with wealth. He gave it to you, and he can take it away from you like that. It's his money. Just in his graciousness, he's given you some of it and asked you to steward it. To take good care of it for him and use it for the things that matter the most to him. Honoring God with your money is the best way to ensure his blessing on your financial health. That's hard for most Americans to trust. It's really hard for them to trust. Because we like to think, I earned it. I went to college all those years. I got the graduate degree. I went to all that training. I've worked hard all these years, 50, 60, 70-hour weeks. That's my money. And God says, no, it really isn't. It really isn't. And if you want to know a financial piece about your life, you'd be wise to honor my place in your finances. Look at this passage of scripture. It comes from the pages of the book of Proverbs, which again, is not a promise. It's a precept that you're wise to honor in your life. Proverbs says this, trust in the Lord with all of your heart. Don't lean on your own understanding in all of your ways. In all of your ways. Submit to him, and he will make your path straight. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord. Stay away from things that are evil. This will bring health to your body, nourishment to your bones. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. He's writing to an agrarian society. That made sense. That's how they made money. Honor the Lord with the very first and best of what you bring in. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing and your vats will brim over with new wine. In other words, you will be financially prosperous as you honor me in the place of priority that I should have in terms of your money, the most valuable commodity of your life. And we step back and we go, well, thanks, preacher. I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I'm not doing that. I go, okay, it's your choice. You just need to know that you do not have the blessing of God's financial stability hovering over your home as long as you continue to push him out of the equation. Okay, you all right? I got a couple minutes left. I want to give you 3 suggestions. These are just 3 practical ways that I think every couple should honor if they hope to accelerate and nurture and protect that oneness that Christ intended for their marriage. The first one is this. Spend less than you make and save the difference. Folks, that one principle could change your marriage. The discipline of spending less than you make and learning to save the difference. There's a couple of different ways to do that. I just can't emphasize enough the power of a monthly budget. A husband and wife being committed together toward shared financial goals that they'll actually sit down and have a intelligent adult conversation with each other about how they're going to distribute the money that they have in the priority of we're going to spend less than we make and we're going to save the difference. Number one, greatest advice from most financial advisors for any couple getting started in the world of managing their finances is start an emergency account. Dave Ramsey, Financial Peace University. The very first exercise that Dave Ramsey is going to encourage a couple who wants to know financial health and wellness in their life is start an emergency account. Just $1,000. Just start there. Put a cap on it, but figure out, what are we going to do when the car breaks down? What are we going to do when the washer and dryer stop working? What are we going to do when the HVAC stops cooling our home? Most couples aren't prepared for those unexpected emergencies, so what happens? They end up having to move money around really quickly, and that just creates tension. Have some sort of a savings plan, some sort of a retirement strategy, and if you have children, start as soon as you can laying some money aside for college, and don't count on scholarships. Don't spend all of the college fund on soccer and baseball and football and dance. I'm not saying you can't spend money on those things, but don't you dare think that your kid's going to be the exceptional one that's going to get the huge scholarship to go and play sports for university. And I'll just tell you, if you happen to birth a white male, the chances of getting a scholarship are slim to none. I happened to birth 2 of them. So just some basic wise moves of good financial management goes a long way to protecting the oneness in your marriage. Spend less than you make, save the difference. Want to know what the next one is? Again, just a suggestion. Different accounts are better than separate accounts. I meet a lot of couples that talk to them about their marriage. They come to my office and they wonder why their marriage isn't working. We start talking about history, and we start talking about practices, and we start talking about some of the things that they do. And I'm just amazed at how often I learn that she has her money and she has her accounts. And he has his money and he has his accounts. Just look at the posture. This is mine. This is mine. This does not look like oneness. You say, wait a second, preacher. We learned a long time ago that if we just pull it all together in one big resource, it leads to all kinds of problems. I get that, because usually you have 2 different personalities. You have 2 different understandings of finances. You have 2 different disciplines when it comes to what it takes to manage your money well. So there's a difference between having separate accounts and just having different accounts. Charlotte and I learned in our marriage together that we had very different priorities. We had very different understandings. She grew up in a very wealthy home. Her dad was an attorney. I grew up in a very different economic situation. So we had very different priorities. It was interesting, a few years ago when we received a gift of money, we went to get some help with what to do with that gift of money. And the financial consultant that we were working with, he said, I want to do a little exercise with you. And he gave us a piece of paper. And he said, I want you to write down, what does money mean to you? Try to write it down in a single word. Don't tell each other what you write down. And then he had us hand the papers together into him so that we couldn't change our answers. He said, Paul, you wrote security. That money brings you a certain sense of security, like we're safe, everything's taken care of. There's not going to be any surprises. He said, Charlotte, you wrote opportunity. Money's opportunity. She told us a little bit about that, and in her mind, opportunity was to give our boys every possible opportunity to thrive in life, to enjoy life, to explore life. Well, those were very different sets of values. But me coming to understand more of how Charlotte saw money and her appreciating more how I saw money, it changed the nature of how we dealt with the questions of money. And so our entire marriage, we've had different accounts, but we've never had separate accounts. We have different accounts so that we make sure that everything's in its proper place. And so we have accounts that look like this. We have a household account. This is like money for groceries and gasoline and clothes and shoes and all of those sort of daily operating expenses. And then we have an operating account. This is for like the mortgage payment and 4 cars that we have to buy license and registrations for and those big ticket insurance items. Then we have an emergency account. because we learned the hard way that sometimes the car needs new tires and we weren't expecting that. And we have a savings account, things for like vacation and things for like, Christmas. Christmas is such a killer for so many people. And we have a retirement account. But here's what I want you to understand about that. You can have different accounts. I don't care. I'm just showing you this is our different. But here's the deal. Is Charlotte and I have both complete access to all of these accounts. There's no secrets. All that we've asked each other is that if we're going to manage one of these accounts, like take responsibility for making sure that it's all being handled properly, just don't do something without the other's knowledge, because we learned the hard way through a lot of fights that occasionally when the household account got a little tight, she would just do an automatic transfer from the operating account. Because she would look at that and say, well, there's so much money in there. And I'd say, well, of course there's so much money in there because October's coming and I have to pay the mortgage. I have to pay the property taxes, and it's accumulating. But if I get to October and you've made a lot of little transfers, then I can't pay our property taxes. And that stresses me. And when I get stressed, you and I end up fighting. Do you see? There's a difference between different accounts and separate accounts. Okay, the last one. This is a big one. You ready? Trying to keep up with the Joneses is a great way for the Smiths to ruin their marriage. And folks, I've been a pastor now in this area for 23 years. We are living in the heart of image is everything. And we hide behind our beautiful homes and our latest automobiles and our fancy vacations and our designer clothes and our extravagant lifestyles of concerts and sporting events and all sorts of entertainment. And we all look around and we go, I need to keep up. And what's so absolutely heartbreaking for me as a pastor is that the Smiths come to me and they want some help because their marriage is in a really bad place. And we start talking and we get down to those honest kinds of conversations, and they say, well, our friends, the Joneses, they just seem to be so successful and they're doing so well and they have so many great opportunities in life. And we just want that for us too. We want to go on the summer vacation and the winter ski trip, and then we want to go someplace cool for spring break because they do, and they're our friends, and we want to be able to do that with them. And they got that new Land Rover. We'd kind of like to get one too. And they live in that subdivision, and all of their kids play together on the street, and we'd like to live in that subdivision too. And because of clergy-client confidentiality, I can't tell them, you know what, last week the Joneses were in to see me. I only wish I could tell you how much their marriage is a mess, how many hundreds of thousands of dollars they're in debt. And the anger is at such a place now that they're hitting each other. It's everything in them not to walk out on one another. Because in the stress, she's had a couple of affairs. Because of the stress, he's addicted to pornography. And the whole time, the Smiths are trying to keep up with the Joneses, and the Joneses are a mess. That makes sense? So the best thing you can do is just worry about yourselves. The oneness that God invited you to in the first place. And just make a pact with each other, a husband with a wife and a wife with a husband, that says, why don't we, instead of trying to keep up with the Joneses, why don't we just work on honoring God? What do you say we just trust in the Lord with our whole heart? What do you say we strive to just not lean on our own understanding like we got it all figured out? What if we just started submitting all of our ways to God and prayerfully looking for God to direct our paths, and we'll just live the life that God has called us to live? For some of you in this room, you have a hard time trusting God with all your heart. You like trusting with God when your life is in a pickle and things are hard. But there's parts of your heart that you're not ready to give to him. He's asking for all your heart, all your trust. And some of you, you are not ready to give up your own understanding. You are too smart, too intelligent, too successful, too experienced, and you've got this all figured out, and you know the plan. And I'm telling you, you haven't even asked all the right questions. And for some of you, you don't like the word submit, and you're not going to bow down to anybody, not even God. And I'm just suggesting that the God who created your marriage and the God who provides you the money, he knew what he was doing when he created it all. And the sooner that we bring our lives up under that, the sooner that we'll enjoy the oneness that all of us crave in our marriage to each other. Make sense? Talk about oneness. We're going to talk about sex next week. I expect attendance to triple. Let me ask you to stand together. Let me pray for you. If you want to, you don't have to. If you're comfortable, why don't you reach out and take your spouse's hand? As some sort of a gesture of, oh, that's right, we're supposed to be one. God, so many words. And all I want is for them to be used by you to help make a difference. And I just know that this room is full of couples who in one way or another, they're not experiencing and enjoying oneness. They're divided. And Satan is having a field day in their life. And I'm just positive in this room, there's all kinds of couples who some of that mess is all because of money and the issues surrounding mismanaged finances. And it's eaten their marriage alive with distrust and deception and manipulation and discontentment and frustration and anger and resentment. And God, I'm asking that in your grace, you might step in and give them the courage to trust you with all of their heart, to quit leaning on their own understanding, and to begin in all their ways to submit to you and your will. I ask that for all of us in the name of Christ, our Lord and Savior. Amen. All right, gang, have a great week. We'll see you next Sunday.